Story Chapter 17 Bedreddin. The Egyptian emperor, humiliated by Shemseddin Muhammad's refusal and audacity, could not suppress his anger and told his vizier, "Are you in response to my lower standards? Am I that close to being friends with you like that? I will have to take revenge for you daring to compare me with someone else, and I will curse your daughter to have no husband but the ugliest of all my slaves." Having finished speaking, the emperor cruelly chased the prime minister out. This man went home full of shame and felt extremely humiliated. That same day, the king called one of his horsemen to come. "This guy has a hunchback and chest and is so ugly that a ghost would call him a ghost." After ordering Shemseddin Muhammad to accept his daughter's marriage to this disgusting slave, the emperor drew up a marriage certificate and forced everyone to sign it in front of him. All the preparations for this ridiculous wedding were completed quickly. While I was speaking, all the slaves of the officials of the Egyptian court were gathered in front of a bathhouse, each with a torch in his hand. They waited until the hunchbacked horseman finished bathing, came out, and took her to the bride's house. There she also finished her makeup. While I was leaving care, the ladies-in-waiting had gathered, preparing to take the bride, with all her wedding decorations, to the room where she was to wait to receive the hunchback. I have seen her and I assure you that no one can see her without being fascinated. When the fairy stopped speaking, the spirit said, "No matter how much you praise me, I don't believe that that girl's beauty can surpass the handsome beauty of this boy." "I don't want to argue with you," said the fairy, "but I also have to admit that he deserves to marry the charming girl who was forced to marry the hunchback. I see that we will do a very good thing, very worthy of us, against the injustice of the Egyptian emperor. We let this young man take the place of that slave." "You're right," the god said excitedly. "Do you know, I really agree with that sudden idea of yours. I agree to deflect the Egyptian emperor's revenge, comfort a grieving father, and return to his daughter the happiness she thought was misfortune. I have full ability to carry out this plan and believe that she will not spare any effort. I accept the job of transporting him back to care without waking him up, and you can leave him wherever you want when we begin our work." After the fairy and the god finished discussing everything that needed to be done, the god gently lifted Bedreddin, flew into the air as fast as the wind and placed him in front of the door of an office, next to the bathroom where the hunchback was about to come out with a large group of slaves waiting. Bedreddin Hassan now woke up, extremely surprised to find himself in the middle of a strange city. He wanted to cry out to ask where he was, but the god gently tapped him on the shoulder and told him not to speak. Then he gave him a torch and said, "Get into the crowd you see huddled in front of the bathroom door and walk with them until you reach the room where the wedding is being held." The groom was a hunchback whom he easily recognized. "You stand on his right side and go into the room. From now on, you must always reach into the money bag full of sequins in front of your chest and distribute them to the musicians, dancers who are playing music and dancing. Once inside the room, don't forget to distribute the money to the female slaves who are crowding around the bride as they approach him. Do everything I tell you with your quick wit and resourcefulness. Don't be surprised by anything. Don't be afraid of anyone, because you are supported by a supernatural power." Young Bedreddin memorized everything he had to do and then approached the bathroom door. The first thing was to light the torch on a slave's burning torch, then stand among them as if he belonged to some lord in care, walking with them after the hunchback who had just left the house. Bathed and climbed on the back of a horse in the emperor's stables. The morning light had risen, making Scheherazade silent, and the next night she continued, "Oh, your Majesty," she said. Prime Minister Giafar continued to tell that story to Emperor Harun al-Rashid. Bedreddin walked beside the musicians, dancers and showgirls right in front of the hunchback, occasionally reaching into his pocket to take out handfuls of sequins to distribute to them. Because he did this generous act with such a humble and cheerful attitude, everyone who received the gift glanced at him, and when they saw his face clearly, they did not want to look away anymore because they found him so handsome. Boys are rare. Arrived at the gate of the palace of Prime Minister Shamsuddin Muhammad, uncle of Bedreddin Hassan. This man probably never expected that his nephew would be here, so close to him. The guards, to prevent possible chaos, blocked all the slaves holding torches from entering. They pushed even Bedreddin Hassan back. But the musicians who had stepped through the open door stopped to protest. They said they wouldn't go in unless they let this guy in with them. They said, "This guy is not one of the slaves, just look at him and you'll know." It was probably a young stranger, curious to know how weddings were held in the city. As they spoke, they pulled him to stand in the middle and walked in together, not paying any attention to the soldiers. They took the torch from him and gave it to the first person who had just come out of the house, and after bringing him into the room, they placed him on the right-hand side of the hunchback who was sitting on a beautifully decorated throne next to him. Next to the throne of the Prime Minister's daughter's bride. The bride was gorgeously decorated but had a sad face, a deadly sadness that people could not easily guess the cause of when they saw next to her a very deformed husband who could hardly talk about love. The two thrones of this limp couple are placed in the middle of a large canopy. The ladies of the court and the city sat on both sides, lower according to their rank, all dressed in luxurious and splendid clothes, looking extremely spectacular. Each woman holds a large, burning candle in her hand. When they saw Bedreddin Hassan enter, they all whispered admiration, looking at his figure and his handsome face without taking their eyes off. When he sat down, it wasn't just one person, but almost everyone in turn left their seats to come closer to him to look, and when they returned to their seats, there were not many people who didn't feel their hearts a little moved. The difference between Bedreddin Hassan and the hunchbacked horseman with the disgusting face caused a murmur in the crowd. It is this handsome young man who should be the groom, not the hunchback. That dirty. The ladies did not stop there but also raised their voices to criticize the emperor for relying on absolute authority to make this strange marriage between ugliness and beauty. They also sarcastically insulted and scolded the hunchback, making him confused, making the audience very excited and screaming, sometimes interrupting the melody of the music playing in the wedding room. Finally, the musicians restarted the chorus and the maids who specialized in changing the bride's clothes approached her. Here Scheherazade stopped because it was dawn. The next night, she continued the story she had left off the night before. Oh, Your Majesty, Scheherazade said to the Indian Emperor, surely Your Majesty did not forget that the Prime Minister Giafar was still telling stories about serving the Emperor Harun al-Rashid. Every time he continued, the bride changed her appearance. Dressed, she left her seat again, followed by the maids, passed the hunchback without even looking at him, but went to Bedreddin Hassan to show him the new jewelry. So Bedreddin Hassan, remembering the god's instructions, did not forget to put his hand in his money bag, took out handful after handful of sequins and distributed them to the bride's attendants. He also did not forget the musicians and dancers, throwing fences for them. It was fun to see them pushing each other to bend down to pick up the coins lying on the floor. They looked at him gratefully and showed signs that they wanted the young bride to belong to him, not to that hunchback. The ladies and maids around the bride also said the same thing to him, regardless of whether the hunchback heard or not. And they also did thousands of mischievous and mocking tricks, delighting the entire audience. When the multiple changing of clothes ended, the musicians stopped playing and sneaked out, signaling Bedreddin Hassan to stay. The ladies did the same and withdrew behind them all those who were not in the house. The bride went into a room, followed by maids to help her take off her clothes. At that time, only the hunchbacked horseman, Bedreddin Hassan, and a few servants remained in the room. The hunchback, extremely angry at Bedreddin for haunting him the whole time, glared at him and said, "And you? What are you waiting for? Why don't you leave like everyone else? Get out!" Bedreddin saw no reason to stay there, so feeling awkward he quickly walked out. But before he could leave the lobby, both the god and the fairy appeared and stopped him. "Hey, where are you going?" The god asked. "Please stay? The hunchback is no longer in the room, he went out because of something. Go back and sneak into the bride's chamber. When it's just you and her, you should boldly say that you are her husband, it's just that the king brought out the hunchback just for fun." And to calm this guy down, he told him to prepare a delicious plate of ice cream for him in the stable. Then tell her everything that comes to mind to reassure her. Doing all that is not difficult for him now, and she will be happy because she was deceived in such a pleasant way. However, we will have to order the hunchback not to stop him from spending the night with her because she is his wife, not his. While the god encouraged Bedreddin and taught him what to do, the hunchback was literally out of the wedding hall. Because the god had entered, transformed into a black cat that screamed horribly. The hunchback clapped his hands and hissed, but the cat not only did not run away, but also stood up, glaring at him with red eyes, and screamed even louder than before and swelled up to the size of a donkey. The hunchback was terrified and called for help, but he was so scared that his jaw stiffened and he just opened his mouth without making a sound. Without letting him recover, the god turned into a buffalo and under that animal, said out loud, "That despicable hunchback?" making him even more frightened. He lay down on the floor, raised the hem of his shirt to cover his head and face so he wouldn't have to see that terrible animal. He spoke tremblingly, "Your Majesty, Lord of the Buffaloes, what do you want from me?" "Unlucky for you," the god said, "do you dare to be so bold as to marry my lover?" "Oh, Your Majesty," the hunchback quickly said, "I beg your pardon. It's just that I'm so stupid that I sinned against you. I didn't know that this woman had a lover who was a buffalo. Please give me orders, I swear I am ready to obey you." "You will die," the god said, "if you get out of here or you don't shut up until the sun comes up. If you open your mouth to say just one word, I will smash your head. In the morning, I will allow you to leave this house, but you must run away quickly without looking back. If you even dare to come back, you will lose your life." After saying this last sentence, the god appeared as a human, grabbed the hunchback's feet, raised him upside down, his head touched the ground, so that he was close to the wall. "If you move," he added, "before the sun comes up, like I said, I will grab your legs and slam you against this wall until your head breaks into 1,000 pieces." We return to Bedreddin Hassan. He was encouraged by the god and encouraged by the presence of the fairy. He returned to the wedding room and sneaked into the bride's chamber, waiting for the success of his plan. A moment later the bride walked in, led by a kind old woman. She stopped in front of the bedroom door, encouraging her husband to do all his duties, not looking to see if it was the hunchback or someone else. Then she closed the door and gently withdrew. The young wife was extremely surprised, waiting to see the hunchback, when it was Bedreddin Hassan who came to meet her with the most graceful and elegant gesture in the world. "Oh hey, man," she asked him, "are you still here at this hour? You must be my husband's friend." "No, my lady," Bedreddin replied, "I am a completely different person from that low-class hunchback." "But," she said, "by saying that, aren't you defaming my husband?" "Him, her husband? Miss, how can you be so sure? Don't be mistaken anymore. Great beauty cannot be sacrificed for the most despicable person in the world like that. It is I, my lady, who is happy to have that beauty." The emperor wanted to cause a laugh with her father's prime minister, so he staged this drama. "It was he who chose me to be her true husband." She must have noticed that the ladies, the musicians, the dancers, the maids, and all her servants were extremely interested in participating in this comedy. We had sent the hunchback away, and now he was feasting on a delicious plate of jam and cream in the stables, and she could be sure he would never appear before her beautiful eyes again. Hearing that, the Prime Minister's daughter, as if half dead when she entered the marriage chamber, immediately brightened her face. Her sudden cheerfulness made her beauty even more stunning, making Bedreddin stunned and captivated. "I really didn't expect," she said, "for an extremely pleasant surprise like this. But I thought I would be tormented for the rest of my life. My happiness is increased even more when I have you, a person who is extremely worthy of my affection." Having finished speaking, she took off her clothes and went to bed. As for Bedreddin Hassan, happy to find himself in possession of such a charming and graceful person, he also quickly took off his clothes. He draped them over the edge of a chair, covering the money bag given to him by the Jews, which was still almost full even though he had taken it out many times to distribute it to those present at the wedding. He also removed his headgear to wear the nightcap that people had prepared for the hunchback. He went to bed in just a bra and a pair of boxers. Dawn forced Scheherazade to stop telling. The next night, awakened at usual time, she remembered what she had left off the night before and continued. When the couple fell asleep together, Prime Minister Giafar continued, the god came to the fairy, telling her that it was time to complete the work that had been started, and to be led to this moment was truly perfect. "Let's not let the daylight that's about to break reveal our work," he said. "Go pick up the young man. Don't wake him up." The fairy went into the room where the newlyweds were sitting. Sleeping very soundly, gently lifted Bedreddin Hassan up, leaving him as he was at that time, meaning he was still only wearing a bra and shorts. The fairy and the god carried him very quickly to the gate of Damascus, Cyril country, that's right. When the priests were loudly calling the people to wake up for morning prayers, the fairy gently placed Bedreddin on the brick floor next to the city gate and then left with the god. When the city gates began to open, the people were already there. A large crowd gathered to wait out, extremely surprised to see Bedreddin lying on the ground with only his bra and shorts on. One person said, "Maybe he was in a hurry to leave his lover's house so he didn't have time to put on outer clothes." Another person said, "Let's see, why is he lying here? He must be having fun drinking. I spent most of the night with friends, probably went out to do something I needed to do because I was so drunk. Instead of going back in, I came out here and suddenly fell asleep, so I lay down." Different people guessed this and that, but no one knew exactly why he was there. A light breeze blew the front of his shirt so everyone could see a smooth white chest. Everyone was surprised. At that very beautiful and well-proportioned body part, he cried out in admiration, causing the young man to wake up. He was equally as surprised as them, to find himself lying in front of the gate of a city he had never been to and a large crowd of people surrounded and looked intently at him. "Men," he said to them, "please tell me where I am and what do you want from me?" One of them answered, "Hey young man, as soon as the city gate opened, we went out and saw him lying there. Feeling strange, we stopped to look. Did you sleep all night here? And do you know that this is one of the gates of the city of Damascus?" "Damascus Gate?" Bedreddin exclaimed, "Are you guys trying to tease me or something? When I went to bed, I was in the city of Caire." Hearing him say that, a few people felt sorry for him and said it was a pity that such a handsome young man was deranged, and then left. "My child," a gentle-looking old man said, "if you don't see that you were in Damascus this morning, how could you have been in Caire last night? It's so absurd." "That's true, sir," Bedreddin argued, "and I swear I was in Balsora all day yesterday." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone burst out laughing and shouted, "A crazy guy! What a crazy guy!" A few people expressed pity for his youth and one of the elders told him, "My child, you must be mentally deranged. I didn't think anything when I said it. Think about it. Is it possible to stay in Balsora during the day, sleep in Calra at night and be in Damascus the next morning? You must not be awake yet, please try to remember. What I just said," Bedreddin said again, "is absolutely true. Last night I got married in the city of Caire." Everyone who had laughed earlier burst into laughter again when they heard him say the last sentence. "Be careful," the same old man told him, "it's true that you were just dreaming and the illusion still lingered in your brain." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," he argued. "Think for yourself. In the dream, how could I have come to Caire when I was clearly there? 7 times they brought me before my wife to change her clothes, and there I saw the hideous hunchback whom they intended to bring to her as her husband. Please tell me where my dye, headscarf and money bag are?" Although he tried to tell them that all of that was true, everyone who listened just laughed, making him so confused that he didn't know what to think about everything that happened to him. The sunlight began to illuminate Charler's room, causing Scheherazade to fall silent. And the next night she continued like this. Oh, your Majesty," she said after Bedreddin insisted that what he said was true. He stood up to go into the city. Everyone followed behind and shouted, "A crazy guy! A crazy man!" So the windows and doors of the houses opened wide and heads looked and looked. Some joined the crowd surrounding Bedreddin and shouted like them, "A crazy guy who doesn't understand anything." Bedreddin was confused and didn't know what to do. As soon as he arrived in front of a candy store, He went inside to avoid the people following him and booing. The owner of this candy store was originally the boss of a group of hoodlums who specialized in robbing passers-by, but since settling in Damascus, he had not caused any scandal and also seemed not to be afraid of anyone who knew his origin. So with just one glance from him, the entire crowd following Bedreddin quickly dispersed. When the candy store owner saw that no one was bothering him anymore, he turned to ask Bedreddin who he was and what business he had in Damascus. Bedreddin did not hide from him about his background, about the death of his father's vizier. He continued to tell how he left Balsora, and for some unknown reason, while sleeping next to his father's grave, when he woke up, he found himself in Caire, where he had married a very beautiful young woman. Finally, he was surprised to find that this morning he was in Damascus. He had been thinking about all these strange things but could not understand them. "Your story is very strange," the confectioner told him, "but take my advice and don't let anyone know everything you just told me. Please wait patiently. Wait for luck to come. You can stay here with me until then, and since I don't have any children, I'm willing to adopt you if you agree. Once you are my child, you can freely move around the city without fear of anyone insulting you anymore." Although adopting a confectioner's son was not an honor for the son of a prime minister, but given the current situation, perhaps this was the best solution, so he happily accepted the offer. Good-natured confectionery. This man gave him decent clothes, chose witnesses and declared before the authorities that he adopted him. From that moment on, Bedreddin lived with his foster father under the short name Hassan and began to practice making cakes. While all this was going on in Damascus, Shamseddin Muhammad's daughter from Caire woke up and, not seeing Bedreddin lying next to her, assumed he was awake for something and did not want to interrupt her sleep. But wake up gently. She sat and waited and saw the Prime Minister Shamseddin Muhammad, her father, enter. She was very emotional because she thought the Egyptian emperor had humiliated her, so he came to mourn with his child for his sad fate. She kissed her father's hand and welcomed him with such satisfaction that he was shocked because it was completely contrary to what he expected, which was to see his daughter filled with tears and heartbroken just like him. "Damn army?" He angrily scolded his son. "Can you still be so excited? After a hideous sacrifice you just endured, are you still so cheerful?" Scheherazade stopped talking here because it was already dawn. The next night, she continued and told the Indian emperor as follows. Oh, Your Majesty. This is still Prime Minister Giafar continuing the story of Bedreddin Hassan. When the new bride, he said, saw her father scolding her because she seemed happy when she saw him coming, she said, "Father, please don't scold me so unfairly. It's not like I married the hunchback that I hate like dirt, the devil. That porcelain is not my husband." Everyone humiliated him, so he had to run away to an unknown location, and in his place was a wonderful guy, my true husband. I told you the myth. What is it? The Prime Minister suddenly interrupted me. What? Hunchback, didn't you sleep with me last night? No, Father, she replied, I didn't sleep with anyone except the guy the first just told you about. He did. Big eyes and thick black eyebrows. Hearing that, the Prime Minister couldn't help but get angry. Ah! Cruel soldier. He told her you want Father to go crazy because of what you just said. Is that it? It's you, Dad? She said it's you who makes me crazy because of your skepticism. "So there's nothing wrong?" The Prime Minister softened his voice. "That hunchback. Dot. Dot. Oh, Father. Leave that hunchback alone?" She hastily interrupted. "The hunchback's father? Why do we keep hearing about it? I would like to remind you once again," she added, "I have never spent the night with him but with my beloved husband whom I have already told you about. He's probably coming back soon." Shamseddin Mohammed stepped out of the room to look but found no one, but was extremely surprised to see a hunchback guy, his head touching the ground, his feet raised high, in the same position that the god had placed him against the wall. "What is this?" he asked him. "Who put you in this state?" The hunchback recognized the Prime Minister and replied, "Ah. So you wanted to marry me to be the wife of a buffalo man's mistress, the lover of a villain? I'm not stupid, how can you trick me?" At this point, Scheherazade saw the morning light coming through the door and couldn't tell any more. The next night, she continued the story of young Bedreddin Hassan and told the Indian emperor, "Oh, Your Majesty," the Prime Minister of the Ja'far dynasty continued to tell, "Shamseddin Mohammed thought the hunchback was panicking and spoke nonsense, so he said, 'You are put your feet down, get out of here.' 'I don't dare,' the hunchback said, 'if the sun hasn't risen yet. Do you know, last night here, a black cat appeared in front of me. Suddenly it passed as big as a buffalo. I won't forget what he said. So go ahead and do your work, leave me here.' The Prime Minister, instead of leaving, grabbed the hunchback's legs and forced him to leave. Stood up. This guy ran out of the room on all 3 legs and 4 legs, not daring to look back. He went to the palace to meet the Egyptian emperor, making the king burst out laughing when he heard him tell the story of how he was treated like a god. Shamseddin Mohammed returned to his daughter's room, even more surprised and confused about what he saw and the more he wanted to understand. "Hey, my daughter," he told her, "you cannot explain more clearly about what is it that you no longer understand what he's doing?" "Father," she replied, "I can't tell you anything more clearly than what I've already told you. But these," she added, "are her husband and children's clothes that he draped over the back of that chair. Maybe they can make things clearer for me." Having said that, she gave him Bedreddin's headdress. He took it and examined it carefully inside and out. "It looks to me," he said, "like a vizier's headgear, the Mosul style." But he still saw something stuck in the middle of the lining, so he asked for the scissors, and after untying the seams, he saw a folded piece of paper. That was the notebook that Nuruddin Ali gave to Bedreddin, his son, before closing his eyes, and he hid it there for careful protection. The Prime Minister opened the notebook and noticed the writing of Nuruddin Ali, his younger brother. He read the headline, "For my son Bedreddin Hassan." Before he could think about anything, his daughter put the bag of money in his hand that she saw under a pile of clothes. He also opened it and saw it was full of sequins, and as I said, although Bedreddin Hassan was very generous, taking out handfuls to distribute to everyone, the bag was still full, thanks to the god's care. Spirits and fairies. The vizier read on the label of the bag, 1,000 sequins of the Jew Isaac. And below, to Bedreddin Hassan for the entire cargo of the first ship to arrive in the entire convoy belonging to Nuruddin Ali, his father had passed away. Just after reading the label, the Prime Minister cried out loudly and fainted. Scheherazade wanted to continue, but it was already morning. The Indian emperor stood up and said to himself, he must hear the whole story. The next night, Scheherazade continued the story, telling Charler, "Your Majesty, Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed has regained consciousness by his daughter and the maids she called for intensive care. He told his son, 'My daughter, don't be surprised why I fainted like that. How could I not be too emotional when the cause was an unimaginable occurrence? The husband who spent the night with you was your cousin, the son of Noorddin Ali, my younger brother. The 1,000 sequins I found in this bag reminded me of my quarrel with this dear brother. It must have been the dowry gift he gave his son. Thank God for everything, especially this miraculous event that demonstrated his power.' Then he looked at his younger brother's handwriting and kissed him many times. Tears welled up in his eyes. 'How can I see Noorddin himself here?' he muttered, 'as well as seeing these handwritings has made my heart indescribably happy, to be able to reconnect with him.' He read carefully the notebook from beginning to end and found the date of the younger brother's arrival in Balsora, of his wedding and of Bedreddin Hassan's birth, and after comparing it with the date of his wedding and the date of his daughter's birth in Caire, saw that the coincidence was so strange, and thinking that his nephew had become his son-in-law, he felt extremely happy. He took the notebook and the label attached to the money bag and presented it to the emperor, and was completely forgiven for the past incident. The emperor also found it extremely pleasing to hear this beautiful, thrilling story from beginning to end, and had it recorded to pass on to future generations. However, Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed did not understand why his nephew disappeared. He always hoped to see him at any moment and patiently waited to hug and kiss him. After 7 days of fruitless waiting, he searched all over Caire, but could not find any news, even though he spared no effort. He was extremely worried. What an extremely strange event! He thought to himself, no one has ever seen such a thing. In doubt that what would happen next, he carefully recorded everything he saw: the situation of the house at that time, how the wedding was conducted, the wedding room and the bride's room. How did your daughter-in-law present it? He also folded the turban, money bag and the clothes Bedreddin left behind into a package and carefully locked it in the trunk. Queen Scheherazade was forced to stop because she saw the sky was dawning. At the end of the next night, she continued the story with the following words: "Oh, Your Majesty." Prime Minister Giafar continued to speak to the emperor. After a few days, he said Lady Prime Minister Shemseddin's daughter Muhammad found herself pregnant, and 9 months later she gave birth to a son. A wet nurse, many servants and other slaves devotedly cared for him, and the boy was named Agib by his grandfather. When the boy Agib at the age of 7, the Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed, instead of sending him to school at home, instead sent him to school to be taught by a good and famous teacher. 2 slaves were responsible for picking him up every day. Agib played with his friends, everyone. They were all in a lower class than him, so they feared him. Even the teacher pampered him more than the other students. This blind pampering harmed Agib. He became arrogant. Arrogant. He wants all of his friends to obey him, but he never gives in. He always wants to be the best, and if there is a friend who dares to do otherwise, if he disagrees with your opinion or goes against it, he doesn't hesitate to curse and even go to the extent of punching and kicking. In the end, he became an unbearable thorn in the side of all his classmates. They told the teacher. At first, the teacher advised them to try to be patient, but when he saw that they were doing so, Agib only became more arrogant and insolent, and he himself was too tired because of the extreme behavior of this special student. One day he told his students to come and tell him, "Children, I clearly see that Agib is an arrogant and insolent child. I want to show you a way to soften him up so that he does not dare to bother you. Again, I still believe that he will no longer dare to go to school. Tomorrow, when he comes, invite him to play a group game. Let's all gather around him and one of them will say loudly like this, 'Let's play a fun game together,' but whoever wants to play must say their name, their parent's name. Anyone who does not do so is considered an illegitimate child and we will not let them play with them." The teacher told them that by doing so, Agib would be confused and would have to give up his arrogance. They all went home, happy and cheerful. The next day, when everyone gathered, they did not forget to follow the teacher's instructions. They gathered around Agib and one of them said, "Let's play a fun game, but on the condition that anyone who can't say their name, their father's and mother's names, can't play." All agreed, as did Agib. So one after another they opened up smoothly. When it was Agib's turn, he said, "My name is Agib, my mother's name is Dmq and my father is Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed." All the children shouted, "Agib, what are you saying? That's not your father's name but your grandfather's name. May God shut you up." Agib shouted angrily, "Do you dare to say that the Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed is not my father?" His student laughed even louder and told him, "No, that's not it, that's just your grandfather. You can't play with us, and you can't come close to us either." After saying that, they just dispersed. The teacher mocked him and laughed together. Agib burst into tears, feeling so humiliated. The teacher heard everything and walked in and said to Agib, "Agib, you still don't know that Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed is not your father. He is your grandfather, the father of your mother Dmq. Like you, we don't know your father's name but only know that the emperor wants to marry your mother to a hunchbacked horseman, but the god slept with your mother. That's not a good thing for you, so you should learn to treat your friends with less arrogance and snobbery like you've always done. Now that you're here, the sky is shining." Morning, so Scheherazade stopped talking. The next night she continued the story and told the Indian emperor as follows, "Oh, Your Majesty, young Agib, feeling sorry for the teasing of his friends, suddenly dropped out of school and went home as he walked. Cried. First he went back to his mother. Dmq panicked when she saw her son so upset and quickly asked the reason. The boy could only respond with broken sobs and many times asking. Only then did he clearly explain his sadness and humiliation to his mother. When he had finished telling the story, he asked his mother, "In the name of God, please tell me who is my father?" "My son," she replied, "your father is the Prime Minister Shemseddin Mohammed. He hugs and kisses you every day." "I am not telling you the truth, that is not your father but my father." "But you, who is your father? You or me, which fathers?" Your question made Dmq remember her wedding night and the long period of loneliness that followed as a widow. She shed tears, painfully and bitterly regretting a husband. Extremely cute was Bedreddin. While mother and son were mourning together, the Prime Minister Shemseddin entered and asked the cause of their grief. Dmq spoke clearly and told him about the humiliation that Agib had suffered. At school, The story made the Prime Minister extremely moved to tears and realized that everyone could make judgments that would harm the honor of the whole family. He sighed in disappointment. With that sad thought, he went into the palace to ask for an audience with the emperor, and after prostrated himself at the king's feet, he begged the emperor for his grace to allow him to travel to the eastern provinces and especially to Balsora to find out the whereabouts of his son-in-law Bedreddin Hassan. He also told the emperor that he could not stand the rumor in the city that a god had slept with his daughter Dmq. The emperor sympathized with the prime minister's uneasiness, approved of his intention, and approved his actions. The king also took care to send a message to all the provinces and countries where Bedreddin could temporarily hide with urgent words to please let the prime minister take him home. Shemseddin Muhammad did not have enough words to adequately thank the emperor for his kindness to him. He could only kneel once more before him, but the flowing tears were enough to express his deep gratitude. Finally, he said goodbye to the emperor and wished him all peace and prosperity. When he got home, he only thought about preparing everything for the trip. In just 4 days, everything was completed. He went on his way, taking with him Dmq and her grandson Agib. Scheherazade had finished speaking here when it was dawn. She stopped talking. The Indian emperor stood up and was very satisfied with the queen's story and decided to listen. Continued this story. Scheherazade agreed to satisfy his wishes the following night. And she continued like this. Oh, Your Majesty, Prime Minister Ja'far is still speaking to Emperor Harun al-Rashid. Shemseddin Muhammad and daughter Dmq and grandson Agib were on their way to Damascus. They traveled for 19 days without stopping anywhere, but on the 20th day, arriving at a very beautiful meadow not far from the city of Damascus, they set foot down land and set up tents on the banks of a river that flows through the city and made this a wonderful place to rest. Sultan Shemseddin Muhammad announced that he would stop here for 2 days and continue on the 3rd day. He gave permission. The entourage was allowed to roam around the city of Damascus. They all took full advantage of their master's generosity. Some people were curious to know a city that many people praised, others wanted to go there to sell goods brought from Egypt or buy fabrics and rare things of this country. Dmq wanted her son Agib to enjoy going for a walk in this famous city, so he ordered the black eunuch to take care of the boy, led him around and take great care to protect him so that no accident would happen. "What's wrong with you?" Agib, dressed beautifully, walked with the eunuch, holding a large stick in his hand. Just entering the city, Agib, who was as beautiful as an angel, made everyone pay attention. Some left the house to get a closer look at him, some stuck their heads out the window, and passers-by stopped to look, but as if not satisfied, they followed behind to look longer. There was not a single person who admired him without praising the father and mother for giving birth to such a wonderful child. Accidentally, the eunuch and Agib passed by Bedreddin Hassan candy store because they saw a lot of people gathered there, so they had to stop walking. The confectioner who adopted Bedreddin died several years ago, leaving the shop and all its assets to his heirs. Bedreddin became a store owner and made delicious candies, famous throughout the city of Damascus. Seeing how many people gathered in front of the store were all intently looking at Agib and the black eunuch, he also looked. Scheherazade stopped talking because it was already morning and Shahryar stood up, very nervous. not knowing what would happen between Agib and Bedreddin. The queen would relieve the emperor of his frustration at the end of the next night. She continued, "Oh, Bedreddin Hassan." Prime Minister Giafar continued, especially looked at Agib, and immediately felt extremely moved without knowing why. He was not stunned like everyone else because of his brilliant beauty of the boy. The confusion and turmoil in his heart had another reason that he did not know. It was the power of blood that had affected this gentle and sentimental father. He stopped his work and approached Agib, and said to the boy with affection, "Little angel, you have captured my soul. Please deign to come into my shop and taste something made by me, so that I can enjoy looking at it." He uttered the above sentences so full of love and affection that tears welled up in his eyes, making the boy Agib very moved, and turned to the eunuch. "This uncle," he told him, "had a gentle face and spoke to me so gentle and cuddly, I can hardly refuse his invitation. Let's go into the store and taste some of his candy to please him." "Ah, really?" Slave told him, "For a prime minister's son like you to go to a confectioner's shop to eat cake, that's really handsome." "No way, man." "Oh, my little lord," cried Bedreddin Hassan, "it is cruel that they should give you to a caretaker who treats you so harshly." Then he said to the eunuch, "My friend, do not prevent this young lord from giving me the honor I ask for. Shouldn't have humiliated me like that. Please give me the pleasure of receiving your little master and you in my house to see if he, who is as black on the outside as a seed, will become as white as the kernel on the inside. You should know," he continued, "I know the secret that can turn black into white." Hearing that, the eunuch laughed and asked him what the secret was. "Then I will show it to my friend," he replied. Then he improvised and read verses praising the black eunuchs, saying that thanks to them, the honor of kings and all great men was firmly guaranteed. The eunuch was very pleased to hear those verses and stopped insisting on refusing Bedreddin Hassan's invitation, letting Agib into the shop, and he too. Bedreddin Hassan was extremely happy to achieve what he wanted and continued his unfinished work. "I'm making," he said, "cream cake. You have to taste this cake. I'm sure you will find it delicious because my mother taught me how to make this cake, which she makes very skillfully and is absolutely delicious. Everyone in the city comes here just to sell this one cake." Having finished speaking, he took out a cream cake from the oven, sprinkled it with pomegranate seeds and sugar, and gave it to Agib. The boy ate and commented that it was delicious. The black eunuch was given one by Bedreddin, ate it, and received the same comment. While the two of them were busy tasting the cake, Bedreddin looked intently at Agib and thought that he might also have a son like that with his gentle and lovely wife, who had to soon separate in a strange and cruel way. This thought brought tears to his eyes. He was about to ask young Agib about the purpose of his family's trip to Damascus, but the boy did not have time to satisfy his curiosity because the eunuch urged him to finish eating quickly so he could return to his tent. "Grandfather." Bedreddin looked at him with regret, but then thought why he quickly closed the shop and hurriedly followed. At this point, Scheherazade saw that it was already morning, so she stopped talking. Shahryar stood up and decided to listen to the story until the end and let the queen live until then. The next night, before dawn, Dinarzade woke her sister and she continued as follows. Bedreddin Hassan Prime Minister Giafar continued so ran after Agib with the eunuch and caught up before they arrived. The eunuch saw him following and was very surprised. "Oh, uncle," he said angrily, "what do you want?" Good friend Bedreddin quickly replied, "I have to go out of the city on some business. I almost forgot that I still had something to discuss with my business partner outside the city." This answer was not enough to convince the eunuch. He turned to Agib and said, "There, I was dragged into this because of you. I knew I would regret my ease. You kept wanting to go into this man's shop. I foolishly indulged you." "Maybe it's true," Agib said. "He had something to do outside the city, and the paths belonged to everyone." They continued walking without looking back until they were near the vizier's tents. Then they turned to see if Bedreddin was still going. "Follow any more?" Agib noticed that the baker was 2 steps away from him. His face was sometimes purple, sometimes pale, as if he was deeply moved. He was afraid that his grandfather's prime minister might know that he had gone into the confectioner's shop and eaten there. Therefore, he bent down to pick up a rather large stone right next to his feet, then threw it right in the middle of the bakery owner's forehead, causing blood to flow all over his face. Then he jumped up and ran quickly into the tent with the eunuch. Bedreddin turned back to the road leading into the city, lifted his apron to his chest and wiped the blood from his face. "I made a mistake," he told himself, leaving home to bother this boy. "The reason he behaved like that was because he thought I had some plan to harm him." When he got home, he had his wound bandaged and consoled himself that this disaster was insignificant. There were people in this world who were much more miserable than him. The rising sun silenced the Indian queen. Shahryar stood up and took pity on Bedreddin and was anxious to know the next part of the story. At the end of the next night, Scheherazade told the Indian emperor, "Your Majesty, Prime Minister Giafar continued to tell the story of Bedreddin Hassan as follows. Bedreddin continued to work as a confectioner in Damascus. His uncle, Shemseddin Muhammad, stayed 3 days near Damascus and then continued on. He went straight to Emes and from there went to Hama, then to Halep, staying here for 2 days. From Halep he crossed the Euphrates, went deep into Mesopotamia and after passing through Mardin, Mosul, Senjil, Diyarbakir and many other cities, finally reached Balsora, where he asked for an audience with the king. He was solemnly welcomed because the emperor knew he was Prime Minister Shemseddin Muhammad, and asked why he came to Balsora. "Your Majesty," the Prime Minister replied, "I have come here to hear news of my brother Noreddin Ali's son, who has had the honor of serving Your Majesty." "Noreddin Ali passed away a long time ago," said the emperor. "As for him, all that can be told to you is that 2 months after father's death, he suddenly disappeared, and since then no one has seen him even though I let me search everywhere. But his mother is the daughter of one of my prime ministers, who is still alive." Shemseddin Muhammad asked him to allow him to visit her and take her back to Egypt. With the king's approval, he did not want to wait until tomorrow to ask her whereabouts and came immediately, along with his daughter and grandson. Noreddin Ali's widow remained at the mansion where her husband had lived until the day of his death. It was a beautiful mansion, solidly built and decorated with marble columns, but Shemseddin did not stop long to look. Arriving there, he kissed the door on which was a marble plate engraved in gold letters with his younger brother's name. He demanded to see his sister-in-law, and the servants showed him to a small hut with a domed roof standing in the middle of a large yard. This gentle mother often went to the hut built to represent the grave of Bedreddin Hassan, whom she thought was dead, but after a long time of waiting, she could not find him. She often stays here for a large part of the day and night. At this time, she was missing her child and was in tears. Shamseddin Muhammad walked in and saw her writhing in pain. He greeted her, and after asking her to suppress her grief and wipe away her tears, he said he had the honor to be her brother-in-law, and explained the reason why he left Caire to go to Balsora. At this point, it was just dawn, so Scheherazade had to stop to continue the story at the end of the next night. Shamseddin Muhammad Prime Minister Ja'afar continued after telling his sister-in-law everything that happened in Caire on his daughter's wedding night, including the discovery of a notebook hidden in a turban. Bedreddin's head shocked him so much, he introduced Agib and his daughter Dm to his sister-in-law. When Noorad-Din Ali's widow, previously a person bored with everything in the world, understood through her husband's words that her beloved son might still be alive, she stood up and hugged her. Lovingly Dm and the boy Agib, whom she realized had Bedreddin's features, so she shed tears again, but they were different tears than she had shed in a long time. She kept hugging and kissing the boy, and he received those affectionate gestures with all his joyful heart. "My sister-in-law," Shamseddin Muhammad said, "it's time for you to stop mourning and dry your tears, ready to return to Egypt with us. King Balsora has given me permission to take you with me, and I believe you will kindly agree. I hope we will eventually meet your children, my grandchildren, and if this happens, their stories, yours, my daughter's and mine, deserve to be recorded for posterity." Noorad-Din Ali's widow heard what her husband said and felt pleased, and from that moment she let her family prepare everything for the trip. During this time, Shamseddin Muhammad asked for a second audience to say goodbye to the king and was rewarded with many honors along with a large gift for him and another more precious gift sent to the Egyptian emperor. He and everyone left Balsora and headed straight to Damascus. When approaching this city, he set up a tent near the city gate he had to enter, and said he would stay there for 3 days to let the whole group rest and to find and buy rare and precious things worthy of being an offering to the king. Egyptian Empire. While he was busy personally selecting the beautiful silks that famous merchants brought to the tent, Agib told the black eunuch who took care of him to take him for a walk in the city, to see things. "I didn't have time to look closely when I passed by and also wanted to know what happened to the confectionery vendor who was stoned." The eunuch agreed to go into the city with him, after receiving permission from his mother Dm. The two entered the city of Damascus through the Heavenly Gate, the gate closest to the tent of Prime Minister Shamseddin Muhammad. They passed large construction sites, roofed bazaars where precious goods abounded, and saw a mosque where worshippers gathered at noon and in the afternoon to pray. Then they went to Bedreddin's shop and saw him engrossed in making cream cakes. "Hello," Agib said, "look, and do you remember seeing me?" Bedreddin was stunned. "Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.